So being an end-of-year review, this has ended up being the longest podcast. And if we try and do an intro like normal, the intro is going to be as long as the podcast. So my suggestion is that we don't do an intro and we just ask for listener trust that there may be something of interest in here.
I like it.
Anything you'd like to add?
Sorry, boys, it froze my end.
Oh, good. I think that is a perfect way to start this podcast. Thank you, Aaron. Good morning.
Morning, guys.
I'd just like to, for the people not watching the YouTube version and that are listening at home, in front of us is Jack, sitting with the world's most professional pod microphone. So his audio today should be top notch. Welcome to the club, Jack.
Cheers. For the YouTube listeners, I've even got a boom.
It's all about the boom.
Even got a boom. What a fancy. How are we doing?
Great. I'll tell you what, though, I'm looking forward to getting some sunlight. I haven't seen sun for 12 days.
Yeah, so you've survived a cyclone and then flooding, and they turned off the water, and then you had to drink from the bath like a pack of goats.
Pretty much. Look, in all fairness, we've had it pretty easy. We've been not really affected compared to many that have been absolutely devastated. But far out, and in full credit, like the infrastructure here has held up with that flooding. Like they've done a remarkable job. But yeah, it's been an interesting 2 weeks.
And Adelaide, Jack, have you had much rain? You're in a jumper there. Is that right?
It's cold. I'm in Ugg boots as well.
It's cold. It's the 20th of December.
I know. Things
Adelaide.
are changing. Christmas used to be 40 degrees, stinking hot, and then the last few years it hasn't been very warm. But today,
Jack, is this a tribe or canopy hoodie that you're wearing?
this is. I don't even know what hoodie this is, and my mum got me it. So it's some rugby club's hoodie. But yeah, I haven't unpacked, so my tribe and canopy hoodie are in my bag still.
It's good to see you all set up back at home base, Jack.
Yeah, it's good. Good to be back.
Yeah, we're on the final stretch. Tomorrow is the 21st of December, which, if you recall, that's the key date in How to Make Gravy by Paul Kelly.
Great.
It's the 21st of December. If I get good behaviour, I'll be out of here by July. Which, as someone with 3 young kids, I feel like I need to get some good behaviour to get out of here by July. But anyway.
What about you, Don? How's your week been?
How has my week been? Been a good week, busy week, couple of board meetings, a couple of portfolio sessions. We're in the stages of deciding whether we're going to take a deal through to the IC or not. So that's always exciting.
Yep.
And looking forward to a little bit of a break over the Christmas.
Yes, break. It's I'm looking forward to downing tools, but then actually catching up.
There won't be any downing. I was at a thing last night, and they were just talking about lifestyle businesses, and I was like, "You are fucking insane. There's no such thing. Whoever sells you a lifestyle business, if you're not in it, you're not in it. But don't think that you're going to start a business for lifestyle purposes.
No, it's an oxymoron. Those two words don't belong together.
Yeah, that's totally batshit crazy. So for today, we're going to do a bit of an end-of-year review. We're going to try and tie a few different things together. We're going to look back at, I guess, some of the things that were reasonably major during the year, although I suspect we will have missed a lot of things. Funny how time flies.
Yeah, it's funny preparing this, just realising, oh, wow, that was this year. And then other things that felt like just yesterday, actually some time ago. It's weird how we remember what has happened.
But I think from a point of view of the biggest piece of news would have to be this podcast.
Without doubt. Absolutely.
And yesterday we found out that we've had enough time in market to be charted, and we debuted at number 92, top 100.
In the top 100 for the category of finance.
There might only be 98 podcasts, but let's not. Let's not. On Christmas, I'm actually going to get. Actually, no, I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to tell the family they've all got to actually do what I've asked and rate the podcast, please. And I'm going to stand over them while they get their phones out. I know my brother-in-law is going to go, Don says that the podcast is really good.
If any of our listeners do want to send us a Christmas gift, a rate and a like would be awesome.
Yes, the ratings do make a big difference. And even if you don't like the podcast and you think it's terrible, still give us a really good rating, because then we can embarrass ourselves in front of other people.
The haters just need to give us space. We'll do it ourselves.
Yeah. One of the big lumpy items that we came and reminded ourselves was Silicon Valley Bank when that disappeared. And
Yeah.
at the
The
time,
very
I
day in
remember
March.
it was, yeah, it was all the way back in March, almost a little bit surreal in that there was a lot of forecasts around end of times. The industry seemed to have handled and moved on.
I remember when that broke, how big a news item it was. And at the time, we had an investment out, and I sent out an IM. And I remember copying it from one investor who said, "It's such an inappropriate time to be raising
Yes.
capital when this is happening in the market.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
really should think about the messaging that you're sending." I'm like, "Whoa, calm down, big fella."
Yeah,
But
the message is life goes on. You don't have to
yeah,
invest.
But
exactly.
yeah, that was a really scary time, but it was lucky how it played out because it could have been a lot worse if
Totally.
a lot of the founders, the startups weren't backed, like the capital they had in the bank.
Yeah, very true. It could have led to a run across other banks and all sorts of things, right? And there were even the inklings of that starting, but here we are.
We had one port had some money tied up there, but it was a really good lesson in making sure that you have very strong, helpful shareholders. Because in one instances, the money got tied up, and the shareholder wired them a chunk of cash on a handshake, keep them moving. And that's just why it's so important to not get overly focused just on things like valuation from investors. It's when the shit goes down and I'm in the trenches, are these people going to be there to back me and be with me or take advantage of me? Because poorer investors could have done highly dilutive equity raises to try and get a bigger chunk of the pie. This investor just went, "No, I've got you. Here's the cash. Market rate on interest, once this clears itself up, which they knew it would, just send me the money back."
Yeah, and it's such a good reminder that you have to make these investments and build those relationships in the good times, because you can't just treat your investors like an ATM when things go wrong. Having
That
those
could only have happened
relationships and
because of
forging.
deep trust.
Exactly.
Speed,
Yep.
you can only go as fast as the speed of trust, right? And without lawyers and hardcore documentation and everything else, to just have here's hundreds of thousands of dollars the next day to keep moving, that is a trust-based scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. There's also been some big news in the free trade agreements between UK and Australia. I know for many that probably is a bit of a blip and non-event, but for the world we play in, it is good to see that finally ratified back in May. What it means is it's much easier for companies to do business from Australia into the UK, but also vice versa, which is also potentially competitive to some Australian companies. Now we're seeing more and more UK companies entering the market here in Australia as well.
Yeah, I think it's so important to have those connections. I think one of the things I've learned this year is that there is so much help available if you go to the right places that I think a lot of founders just don't realize exist. There is these agreements are then backed by government resources and people in market and different grants that if you are willing to put in a little bit of the time and the effort, you can find them. And Aaron, you're more knowledgeable on this than I am. Where should founders go for that assistance?
Yeah, so here in Australia, your best bet is to reach out to the UK government team at Department of Business and Trade. They have heaps of staff here in country to help you navigate the FTA, the free trade agreement, all the benefits of that, and plug you into the UK market. And then equally, every state government and territory government has their equivalent of a trade and investment. So Queensland Trade Investment Queensland, New South Wales Investment, Global Vic, and they all have teams to help you navigate all of that as well. So plug in, to Don's point, there's no shortage of support.
Yeah.
The other big one for 2023 was Threads. Threads launched in July, which seems like yesterday, grew to 100 million users in a week. And now, have any of us logged back in anytime recently? I've not used it.
I have, but that's because I'm old. No, if you recall, I think I said the problem with Threads was that it wasn't integrated to Instagram. But if you have a look at the last few months, more and more they've started to integrate a little bit, where there's these little, like, I guess, highlighted threads in your Instagram reel. And so if it's interesting enough, I have clicked on it, and then that takes you into Threads. But I must admit, I haven't played there. But if you're an investor in that first week, you would sit there and say product market fit. And then in the next week, you'd be going, what's the annualized churn ratio? My spreadsheet can't calculate it.
Daily active users are bad.
Yeah.
But I think I know we're going into the predictions later on, but I still think if like Threads is dead on all counts of every metric, I still think it's smart if the OPEX and the running expenses isn't too expensive to just maintain it there in case Elon does anything, because you have to migrate somewhere.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right. And we'll get to Elon, but the self-immolation, if that continues to happen on the Twitter platform, text-based social media threads, so to speak, are a thing.
And everyone's got an account.
Yeah. Oh, well, I did a tweet this week and had 0 engagement, which I'm taking as a more of a personal sign of me than Twitter. But compared to what it used to be, after that, I'm like, what is the point? So maybe I will make a Threads revival over Chrissy.
That's a new channel for Tribe. 2024.
It's all about the Threads.
Yeah, but wouldn't that almost be so VC when 80% of everyone's left? We turn up.
Yeah.
Oh my God, Threads. And so that was, I'm not going to call that a failure. I think to Jack's point, I think it's going to percolate, and there is a much greater than zero chance that something happens here. But we did start in the Australian market to see some of the big failures start coming through, and I think the big one that stands out in memory is Milk Run.
Yeah, Milk Run, which ended up getting bought back by Woolies, wasn't it? They took it on post-liquidation.
Yeah, so they've maintained the brand, and Milk Run still exists, but it's just owned by Woolies. But I don't know, do you guys remember when it all went down on LinkedIn? It was so amazing to see the ecosystem. Everyone was reaching out, giving support to any of the employees that have been made redundant or had to leave. It was a really...
Except for the AFR.
Yeah, except for the AFR. But it was great to see on LinkedIn, and everyone got around them, and it was cool to see the brand Milk Run was able to build in that short period.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a good point, Jack. We did see liquidation rates rise this year, which we had anticipated. There was talked about a lot with the end of COVID, end of grants and subsidies, and all the kicking the can down the road coming to an end. But it's good to see that it carried on under Woolies. And I see more ads for it now than I ever did before the liquidation. Like, it seems to be more of a household name now, as almost as a result of its liquidation.
It's a bit with some of these really high growth, high capital businesses that didn't quite, that took a growth at all costs approach. It's a bit like in the hotel and resort games. It's the second and the third owners that do well out of it. The people that built it and blew up all that capital, they get their ass handed to them. It's the next people that tend to be able to make something out of that asset.
Yeah. We couldn't talk about 23 and not talk about Elon Musk. And Don, I think it's only fitting for you to kick this bit off.
Who's this? Elon? Yeah, look, I think it's just been incredible I think it's probably more like 18 months, but really the acceleration in the last 9 months of how a strength overplayed becomes a weakness, and all of that energy and approach that helps people like Elon build great businesses. And I think it's fine to hold opposing thoughts. You can have built some great products and some great businesses that will endure. People like me can also take a negative view of the capital stack and take a dim view of the equity, but still accept that the product is good. And then the entrepreneur can still have built a good business, but still be mad as a cut snake and 2 party pies short of a picnic. And it's just this, when you've got no guardrails around you, what's that thing? He looked around and wept there was no worlds left to conquer. When you can have anything you want, whenever you want, like, what else is there to do apart from start taking on the entire world and create scenarios that you've got to fight your way out of? It's like it's like a self-destructive pattern that you couldn't just sit and be happy with what it is. You've got to go and create shit for yourself, so that way you can be the victim and then rally your energy.
Yeah, there's probably a comment I could make in there about narcissistic personality disorder, and whatever the narcissistic supply is, good or bad, they feed off it. But I was interesting doing a bit of Googling for this potty, and the Twitter X rebrand was awarded the biggest rebrand fail of 2023, if not all time. And just the valuation, I think all the metrics, like whatever way you measure it, all the metrics at Twitter are just down. But yeah, look, he has achieved a lot.
I think it was Lainey Stead in her article said that him saying that advertisers boycotting him was blackmail is like an investor saying to a startup, I'm not investing, but then the startup suing them for blackmail. That's just batshit crazy.
It is batshit crazy. But everyone will know, they'll know that it was their fault.
Yeah. They'll know. They'll tell planet Earth. It's like, all right, big fella. But look, he's a human. As the U2 song, still haven't found what I'm looking for. I hope he finds it, and he finds that peace one day. Although then there'd be nothing for me to bitch and moan about and demonstrate all of my own internal problems either.
Yes. And look, the other big one from the year was WeWork. Yeah, that
We fucked.
yeah, we didn't work. The demise that was long predicted finally occurred.
Yeah, my grandkids one day, and they'll say, Grandpa, when you shorted WeWork because it was such a layup basket case and you implemented all the rubbish that you talk about, what was that like? And then I have to disappoint them and say, I forgot.
Yep, fair call.
I did get
Yes.
Nikola. What's Nikola's share price at the moment? Because I'm still holding that. It's not zero yet. Nikola, it's 93 cents. So I got in on that at around about $22, I think.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Down to 2
Nikola
cents.
Dom?
So Nikola was like the Tesla version, but using hydrogen for really large trucks. A lot of hype. I think the founder, did he go to jail? Yeah. So he was one of these types. He did what Elon did, but didn't have the right lawyers and didn't know how to handle fraud at a grand shareholder scale. Nikola's Corporation founder Trevor Milton will spend 4 years behind bars for making false statements about electric hydrogen vehicles. Gee, I wonder what a false statement is. Self-driving autopilot. That would almost intimate that it drives itself, doesn't it? Or like a solar roof would intimate that it was like an integrated solar roof that actually... So anyway, I feel sorry for Trevor. I feel sorry for Theranos. What was Elizabeth Holmes? Elizabeth's a little bit different because she was fucking around with people's lives and people's health, although I would humbly submit dying in an autopilot crash isn't too far off. But when you have a look at how she was treated in terms of the jail sentence, so Trevor has just been given 4 years for fraud, and Elizabeth got 11 years. In this instance, gets judged and penalised much more harshly than the male. But we digress. Where did we start before I left the reservation?
I think maybe if we bring it back to home, in the Australian market, inflation dropped this year. At the start of the year, 7.8% down to 5.4%. And at the same time, interest rates are up. A huge 1.25. It's amazing how much, like when I think back to the 80s and my parents talking about interest rates and the way the world is reacting now to a 1.25%.
Yeah, but our parents bought a 5-bedroom house on 3 acres for $47,000 when their income was $10,000. So they had an income to house value of 4 or 5 times.
Totally agree. And
Now $1 million gets you a shack somewhere.
Not in Adelaide. Not in Adelaide, boy.
What do you get down there, Jack?
Oh, beach views.
Beach views.
Jack, you're the smartest of us.
But I think what's been interesting out of that is that even people like myself have been saying you can't go from 0% interest rates all the way up and not have a massive recession just turn up. But I think what surprised us is the sheer amount of cash sitting in the boomer side of life, and then also assets being driven up as well. And it's managed to keep the merry-go-round merry-going.
Yeah, look, if the Westfield Christmas car park index is anything to go by, far out, people are still spending.
I've got to believe that this is like the last hurrah and that the belts have to tighten. I know mine is well and truly tightening earlier next year, but not before, trying to make amends for some of my behaviour with my wife and her gifts.
I knew it was a sign of economic times when I saw you pull out all your lawnmowers and ride-ons and tractors and actually talk about selling some of them. It's like the fleet is going to be diminished.
When you unpack some of the behavioural problems that started in childhood, you've got to start shedding some of those issues.
I think anyone who wants a measure of the economic climate, we just need the chart of Don's farm equipment acquisitions and sales.
Yeah, can't take it all with you, but doesn't mean I'm not going to try. And Jack, you made a point during our sort of end-of-year strategy session around how interest rates were really changing our LPs' appetites.
Yeah, so it's something that we've been chatting internally about. Like you can get 6% risk-free in a bank, 10% in a bond, or 20% with venture debt. So times have changed, and when we're speaking to LPs, you've got to be able to find these deals that you can actually foresee a big enough return for a risk-adjusted investment.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's what some founders have had difficulty understanding is it's not that your business isn't still a great business, but that risk-adjusted approach that if an investor can go and get easier returns somewhere else, why would they participate in the equity stack? And I think that's also where venture debt has really had it's like a coming of age, I think. A few years ago, I couldn't even imagine a lot of these companies that are taking on venture debt even having access to debt. And I still submit that a lot of companies that are taking on venture debt should not be taking on venture debt. And 2024 and 2025 might be an interesting time where these venture debt companies end up with businesses that they've had to foreclose on that they don't know what to do with.
Yeah, and just on that piece, a couple of our LPs, really actively looking through liquidations for purchases to make. And the other thing I'd add is it's not just the returns, but the volume of inbound opportunities they're receiving outside of growth and venture. Just phenomenal how much is landing in their inboxes.
Yeah, the rise of AI and some of these tools make them easy to find. And what people don't realize is there's these little family offices with hundreds of millions of dollars being run out of weird little offices in all weird parts of this country that are big allocators of capital. And often they were operators and founders themselves, but having been through that journey, they know what risk look like, they know what pain looks like. And when the world brings to you an environment where you can just sidestep a little bit of risk but still get a reasonable return, and you can fire up the jet and spend more time traveling, that most of them are in Europe at the moment.
Yeah, the other thing, like chatting to a couple of our shareholders, like looking at other assets, like investing in water, for example, just because of the geopolitical environment and instability and just climate change and these things that are influencing their decisions that may not have been there even just a few years ago.
Yeah, it's a bit of a different world, and that's where understanding who you're talking to, what they like from an investment point of view, what you're going to be up against is so important to not then end up wasting the time as much as possible. Now, I still think all investor conversations are valuable because there's something that you should be able to learn and you should be able to ask questions. But this also is the year to remember that if you want money, ask for advice. And if you want advice, ask for money, because we're seeing that so much. The people that have built networks and relationships and have gone to people asking for input, built a relationship, built trust. It's on that trusted basis that then you can migrate into a capital conversation. Coming in cold and just saying, I need some money, the risk becomes is the only thing you're going to get is advice.
Probably worth also noting this year we saw deal flow pick back up in the second half, especially the last quarter, also quality of deal flow, but also valuations. Like it feels like there's a two-speed segmentation of valuations.
What have you seen, Jack?
Agree with your comments, Aaron. We're definitely seeing founders now realizing that if you're not meeting the metrics of what you should be, the valuation's got to come down. But if you're still exceeding expectations, you can really get a nice multiple.
Yeah, if your results are in front of your story and that story's been around for a few years, you're okay. If your results and your story don't match and you don't have a new story, you're in trouble.
And like for us, it goes back to, obviously we've got to work a deal up, go to an IC, and then we have to go to our syndicate. And if the narrative of the story isn't aligning and we can see a clear trajectory, why would an LP who's got such a diversity of investments coming into their box choose this investment?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, we have one of our portfolio co's that will be coming back in market early in the new year for a cap raise, and they're fortunately placed, still being at the market leader with a good sales book, good traction, and also good comparables of others in the sector that they're in, which helps with that investor narrative as well.
Yeah, no, that's going to be exciting.
Of course, we have to talk AI. It seems to have been the year of the AI inflection point. Everything's AI, and we're all redundant.
Yeah.
But OpenAI in general, ChatGPT just took off this year, and it seems the measure of that for me.
Forever though.
Yeah.
When you actually look at it, it's just this year that it's gone mental.
Gone mainstream, I would say. I know something has really penetrated when my mum starts talking about a piece of tech. Yeah. So, wow, okay, this is hitting the tail end of the diffusion curve.
My niece said, ChatGPT helped me pass this grade this year. I was like, as long as you using it to learn, not to.
That's right. I think there are a lot of teachers who use ChatGPT to mark assignments. So
Yeah, totally.
just my AI will talk to your AI. Give me a score.
And it also highlighted through the OpenAI debacle with Sam Altman that these companies are just collections of fallible humans that often come up against each other when vision and mission and values are not aligned. And overnight, it seemed to just go bang. It's like, where did this come from?
Yeah, that was so crazy that weekend. Like, was it the Saturday morning it broke?
Yeah, I remember I'd gone for a
Yeah.
ride, sitting there in my spandex as a mammal, and then next minute,
Yeah. And then it was the most on again, off again.
yeah, no. And there was a great little. I think there's more to the story. Often these things are simpler than people imagine, but it's going to be interesting to see what comes out. But that it's all this behind the scenes stuff that people often don't realize. It doesn't matter whether you're a $1 million company or a $10 billion company. There's all sorts of this weird shit that goes on making the sausage. And that's why I really like the Founder series that Luke and Neer had put together. And we've been really lucky to have Luke on the podcast. Catherine from Bright came on, and what the Founder series tries to shine a light on is that journey behind the scenes. And I think anything that can help normalize it to other founders, saying, hey, don't look at these people and think that they don't have all these problems. They do. And for people that aren't in that journey, to try and have a little bit more empathy for what happens.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic to see Luke take that initiative, and I know he's keen to do more in that space. But yeah, for anyone who hasn't checked it out, dropped in August, jump on it. It's really good just to understand the true side of the founder experience and see 4 very different founders as well. 5 really, very different founders. Definitely worth following.
Yeah, and I think it dovetails like founders sharing founder stories, and we're founders ourselves but have moved into the investing aspect. And this podcast is really just trying to share hopefully some things of value and give some voice to some topics, but another sort of series of founders putting their, I don't know what the term is, their mouth where their podcast is. I don't know, that's incredibly dumb. But Cheryl and Maxine launched First Check.
Yeah. Awesome potty. Absolutely. I know we're constantly talking about ours and we self-promote, but it's that great content, really good guests. Highly recommend listeners listen.
Yeah, no, they are, and they go deep. They absolutely deserve it because the guests and the content and the authenticity and it's really high value stuff. Not 3 idiots half the time making crash jokes.
Yeah, very true. What comes out is just character and values, like just phenomenal humans telling it as it is. And yeah, really keen to see who they get on next year as well, and look forward to consuming more and learning from them and bringing over things that we might be able to adopt into our podcast as well.
Oh yeah, no, we're not. We don't have enough moral fiber not to copy stuff that works. But yeah, and that in a similar theme, Ask the Grapevine launched, and we referenced this in our last podcast. Actually, I still think the world has a little way to go acknowledging some of these issues because, spoiler alert, that episode and the social post was actually our lowest engagement post in something like 12 weeks. So still a little way to go for, I think, people broadly to understand that there is actually an issue here that needs some visibility and some change, but we won't complain about it. We will just continue to do our bit.
Yeah, I think continue the conversation, and I think it just highlights that we need more of these conversations. Like the fact that did have the lowest engagement to date just shows the work to be done.
Yeah. And that's like Ask the Grapevine has a particular area that it's focusing on, but I think the zeitgeist is really changing because Startup Muster came back this year, and that's really great. They launched their first, Australia's Best Mentors list, which I think could have just been called the Sausage Fest list because it was just all dudes, and quite rightly, come on. Are we really saying that there are no female mentors in this ecosystem? Now, to their credit, they listened, they understood, they came back out with a revised list that gave that gender equality, but it's just more and more unacceptable to not have thought through this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to see Startup Muster back. Awesome of Murray Herbst and the team to make that happen. And Yeah, keen to see how the data unfolds. Like first year challenge is always getting the adoption and the survey responses. But at least it's some measure of our ecosystem and we have so many measures on the investment side, but it's great to see something that's measuring the ecosystem side, like accelerators, programs, support, mentors, like that whole gambit that wraps around the founders. So yeah, full credit to Startup Muster. Keen to see the next one.
I think the way I look at it is what maybe people don't fully appreciate is that part of the gender conversation is actually around talking about different energies, and nothing gets up and sustains long term with a single energy. We need the masculine and we need the feminine. You've got to have that ability to balance and integrate and have those two together. But we just see it all the time. If it's just all masculine energy, like one of those posts that I saw the other day that said masculine energy like 5 different times, that is required, but it's not sufficient. It's going to get you into trouble, right? Sure, that's that fight and that energy, but you need the integration, right? You need that connectedness. You need those other qualities, and you need an environment that can handle both. And it was actually on it was Cheryl and Maxine's podcast with Lainey Stead, actually, just talking about if you demonstrate to investors that there's only one type of energy in your company, you're effectively communicating that you can't handle the others. And we know that leads to substandard results and increased risk of something going in, which is why we've said a number of times we've got some work to do, and we acknowledge that, and we acknowledge that because of the value that we know that it adds. And that's why our journey is seeking to improve where we stand in that gender diversity, or any diversity, really.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'm very cognizant of our gaps and shortcomings. And it is about complementary teams, but not just by headcount, but to your point, Don, around integration, like making sure that voices are heard and have influence and are integrated into decision making and execution, like all sides and all aspects of the business.
Yeah, I'd recommend people go and listen to that last episode of First Check, because there are just some really good ideas in there, and I think that's a whole zeitgeisty kind of thing that I think it's frustrating how slow it is in people acknowledging things, but it is like a cultural change and a cultural thing. And one of the big cultural things this year is, a couple of years ago we were told we were all going to work from home and it's all wonderful and that's all going to be fine. But it seems in the last 6, 9, 12 months, everyone's cracked the shits and said, back to the office. This doesn't work.
Yes, having to go into the city recently for a couple of evening meetings and realizing, wow, there is peak hour and everyone's back in the city. But I mean, look, I've found I've been far more productive working at home. We catch up a lot as a team. We spend a lot of time in Zoom.
I think Jack and I need to rate that. A self-estimate of Jack. Do we really think that's true or what?
Wait, which part?
Good answer, Jack. He's our resident peacemaker.
Yeah.
Sorry, Aaron, I digress.
Yes, but even us, like looking at an office for next year, yeah, it is. The sentiment seems to have shifted, and it looks like we're returning back to the office landscape.
A bit like we were talking before of balancing different energies and different requirements. To me, I think it's actually got to be a hybrid. There is time where just at home, in the little office, bashing out stuff is exactly what you need to do. But if you think of that integration word, there is time where just pressing the flesh, being able to have a face-to-face conversation, see body language, you need that as well. And so for what we're looking at is, okay, we're going to move to a hybrid approach. We're going to get some space for a couple of days a week, and then we're going to work from home a couple of days a week, and then one day a week down at our LP's offices, just in connecting. And so we're just going to take a hybrid approach.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing a few people like Jason Calacanis and a couple of others talking about the online era and remote work has been leveraging existing relationships, whereas part of the shift back into offices and physical environments and physical events and real world events is to actually build more networks and new relationships, because that seems to have been harder in a purely online world to build meaningful relationships digitally, which for me really resonates. Like when I think of the key relationships that were built, it was through face-to-face real world events and interactions.
And just random combos that unbelievably turn into amazing stuff down the future. But we're making a commitment to attend a lot more events this year. Put our social masks on and recharge.
Yeah, attend and host. It's a pretty busy dance card for 24.
Yeah, my big novelty calendar is following that. And with Jack is going to be permanently set up in Radelaide, and he's going to be setting up in a couple of different offices. And Jack from Tribe is going to become the ecosystem leader down there, aren't you, Jack?
I don't know about the ecosystem leader.
No, you are. You can have a hat. You need one of those flags that you see
Follow the leader.
Boomer in Europe for Boomer tours, so people don't get lost.
Yeah. But yeah, so we got to work out what our operating rhythm is with me in Adelaide. But yeah, looking hopefully early next year, find some places to at least hot desk. And then I'm sure it'll be a bit of a hybrid role. So a few days at home, a few days in there, see what works.
And for our Adelaide listeners, please do connect with Jack. He's very recognisable. Other than his good looks, he tends to get around in a canopy hoodie,
Yeah,
refusing to wear the Tribe merch.
Yeah, that's a Nigel.
Shout out to our portfolio code, Canopy.
Yeah. Now, another, I guess, a trend, a theme is that LPs want VCs to show them the money. They actually want some returns. They don't just want bits of paper to make them feel good. They actually want cash in the bank. And we saw that, I think Canva's probably the big one this year, where Blackbird and some of the super funds sold down a good chunk. And I think it's just becoming more socially acceptable and required to do some secondary sales in the raise, so then that way that capital can recycle. But it's in what I'm seeing with the LP discussions we're having, especially around our fund, is that we've got to demonstrate an ability to provide liquidity at points in time, not one big bang at the end.
Yeah, definitely. There's been more talk than ever of the need to return capital, and we've seen that with Canva. We've seen it with Employment Hero returned some capital to. Even this morning, I was reading about a fintech that just got funded, 2 point something mil into the company and 1 mil of secondaries. So it's also been the year of the rise of the secondaries, and I think founders are becoming more sophisticated with their understanding of these, not just things like secondaries, but the need to have a pathway to return of capital. For us, it's something we're conscious of in what we do in our syndication model as well. Yeah, I think we'll see more secondaries coming into next year as well.
Absolutely. And secondaries are important for a range of reasons, but if you're an investor, you do have to try and get some risk mitigation, and unicorns can disappear overnight at the moment. And one of the things this year is cyber hacking trends at the big end of town and at the small end of the town. I'm on a board with more PE than venture, but he's the chairman of a company, and they had 7 companies in their portfolio. They go and buy these companies for 20 to 30 million that are producing cash. And one of their companies had a cyber attack. Customer details were released. They couldn't recover. Gone. Liquidation. The end. And I think they paid 20 something million for that. And so it's no longer a little thing anymore. It will bring down companies if you don't have that sorted. And in the family office, we've just engaged a firm both at the digital level, but actually someone who physically is going, I assume no one from there listens to this because I'm about to ruin the... Anyway, we're having people that just randomly turn up to the centre that look like authentic or look there to do a certain reason. I've been sent by so-and-so to look at your server. Can I just go in and have a look at... And so we're doing physical penetration testing as well, not just the phishing attacks and all of that. And we're just going to see who lets who in.
That's really interesting, Don, because it's the human error. Now we're using the cloud software, right? So it's all the infrastructure's externally got the security measures, but it's all the human stuff.
Yeah, and this company showed we got these smart air conditioners that were then connected to the network, and he showed us how he could hack the network through the air conditioner.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a hacker I follow on socials, and he's talking about this increasing number of smart devices in our homes, and he was able to hack into people's Wi-Fi and then monitor all their traffic by getting access to the vacuum in the house. And so it's a lot of these smaller things that we don't necessarily place a question mark around security, yet they are the back door that's providing entry. And then physical world, like I remember one of my first jobs, PwC, post-uni as a grad, they had an incident where people just shadowed someone through a door and stole a whole heap of laptops during lunchtime and literally walked out the building. This small group walked out the building with about 20 laptops. And just by walking in, looking like they should be there in the suit, someone holding the door open for them, it's a bit of a confidence game. But yeah, humans, I think, remain the weakest part of that. We saw a couple of big cases with, I remember that my driver's license details got hacked and I had to go and get the new driver's license. Now they've put an ID number on the cards to try and mitigate against the fact that
Optus got done? Or?
No. So yeah. And then I missed it, but apparently DP World, which is Australia's biggest port operator, was hacked, and it actually stopped 40% of Australia's maritime freight for a period until it was resolved. Yeah, that's a pretty big consequence.
Yeah, so I think founders and investors from a risk point of view really need to pull up their socks and really understand that your company can disappear. And this guy I'm on the board with, they had insurance, and the insurance covered things like getting the company back up and whatever else, but it doesn't cover the capital value of your business. So their insurance policy paid out the $1.2 million or something to do all of that stuff. But ultimately, once the customers lost faith, that was that. And so it's really important. And that's, it's just the uncertainty that's in the world. And this year, unfortunately, has been a continuation of the geopolitical uncertainty. And it's going to be interesting to see if there's a book that I'd recommend for people if you're happy and you don't want to be so happy and you just want to get a little more depressed of the direction we're heading. It's called The Fourth Turning, and it just talks about the cycles that we go in and the inevitability of the cycle that we're in at the moment is the dismantle part of the cycle that we're seeing in the US, and that never ends well. But the key thing there through that uncertainty is retaining being nimble, being careful which geographies that you spread to, all of that.
Yeah, there's definitely lots of uncertainty with wars in Ukraine and Israel. And the political landscape as well, economic landscape. It was interesting, it's a bit somber, but the use of technology in Ukraine with Starlink being used by the military. So now we have private organizations playing increasing roles in conflict, use of drone technology. And this is part of the worry, I think, feeding certain people around AI and integrating that with groups like Boston Dynamics with the robotics advancement. It certainly feels like we're in a bit of an evolution heading into the uncertainty as well. Nothing short of interesting times, but anything, all predictions are proven false, so I'm not going to try and predict it.
What I couldn't have predicted was how quickly the FTX thing disappeared and how big the fuck up was and how quickly the trial came to be and Sam got found guilty. Like, these things just tend to take a long time. But I guess in this world of crypto, everything goes fast. But it was just breathtaking. Like, just every part of that story is it's just amazing. In 2023, there can just be so many different failures. And underlying it all is human FOMO, human emotion, I've just got to get on it. I'm not going to do due diligence. And Taylor
I think the
Swift
speed
still
was
coming out on top. He's one of the few people that looked at it and went, no, not for me. So Tay unbeaten.
Yeah, but I think the speed of the trial and how quick that wrapped up was a reflection of the fact that they just went, yeah, I did all these things. What's the issue? I think it was just that absolute naivety and just confessed themselves. Yeah, I'm just baffled by, even to describe it as a fuck up, I feel is almost a misdemeanor, because it's not like they made a mistake. They were not even cognizant of what they were doing.
The signals were there. Like, an early stage business that's raised X dollars in VC is going to be losing a whole chunk of money. So if it starts spending more money on all sorts of other things, where's that coming from?
Yeah.
So yeah,
it's been a big year.
It's been a big year, and I think it's been a good year, and it's coming into an even bigger year. But that was all the sort of business stuff. What about the personal stuff, Jack? You made a big move to Adelaide. We just spoke about before. What else happened for you this?
I don't know, just getting more comfortable in my role at Tribe.
Anybody that's been listening to this podcast would absolutely agree with us. The growth that we've seen in you has been awesome.
Yeah, even as an analyst, but even, I never thought I'd be on the podcast, and now I've got a mic. I feel not sweating.
Now, yeah.
Oh, no, Jack, what have I known you for 3 years now? Like, the J curve of your growth, the J for Jack J curve. Mate, this year it has been bloody impressive.
Leaving us for dead.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the only thing you got to do is you got to learn to push into, otherwise, especially me, I dominate out of everything, and just leave you some space for you to go and Don, you're high again.
Some other personal news. You guys, you ran the marathon. We've got to talk about that.
Yeah. If a person runs a marathon and no one's there to be told that they ran the marathon, did it actually?
What's the point? The number of
need to stretch.
Instagram memes.
Something I prepared earlier.
Just I don't know.
I love that you have that right on hand. I think you just put it on as you walk out of the office into the day.
Yeah, just remind. Yeah, so no, that was good, and that was just for me. I think it's important in life to try and set things that are going to stretch you mentally, both in the lead up to it and then once you're actually in it, because then you've got to make a decision of who controls you. Do you control your mind, or does your mind control you? And how far can you actually push it? And with some of the work that I've been doing on myself more recently this year of understanding self, understanding ego, understanding who's actually in control, who's not, and you can make a decision to be the outcome of impulses, or you can actually take a little bit more charge. And that's really what the part of the marathon was, at least for me.
Equally for me, the marathon, and this is why I want to go back and do it again, because I want to keep fighting that part of me and make sure I've got that control over my mind.
From my point of view, it'd be smarter just to retire on top. But that's an ego arrogance talking.
Given that I came second place to you, and I'll never live that down because you won't stop mentioning it.
Yeah.
Rematch, buddy.
And Aaron got engaged.
Yes, big year for me personally. An engagement and lots of personal wins, some which I'm not fully comfortable talking about publicly. But yeah, bloody good year for personal life and absolutely stoked. And still wondering how I got so lucky. And mate, Don, you had a third child.
Third child, Maggie.
Oh, Maggie.
Yeah, no, I'm in an incredibly lucky position. She's been an absolute shit the last week, but putting that aside, she's absolutely tremendous. But yeah, she's got some reversion on her sleep patterns, but nobody wants to hear me bitch and moan about that. So that on a tribe front, I think we should just mention again that we've got a podcast.
Yeah, there's probably listeners who aren't aware.
We did 3 investments this year, two new portfolio companies, and we're going to talk a little bit about our portfolio.
Yeah, now our largest check deployed this year, 3 times our previous largest.
Yeah.
So good little milestone, and some new investors, like new active investors, and expanding the investor syndicate, which is great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The London mission was another great mission that really saw some value for the participants there, that we keep getting these little notes every now and then of the connections that they made, the knowledge that they got, and there's nothing like being in market.
Yeah, absolutely. And 2 offsites, the more personal one in Feb, and then the scaling on the business side in November.
Yeah.
Always a ton of fun. So much fun that we've decided to do 4 next year.
Yeah.
We're quite ambitious.
I think they're more for us.
They are for me. Yeah.
No, it's good. I love it when we can get the founders together and investors together, and they can learn from each other, and we learn from them, and hopefully they learn from us.
Yeah.
And
there's something about going out of where you live, and we go to northern New South Wales to a beautiful property. It's such a great weekend.
Yeah. Like it's a really connected weekend of a lot of insights and growth. And we also welcomed a new venture partner recently, Vicky Forrest.
Yeah, which is awesome, and looking to add some more into the mix next year, and also had new interns this year and some more just starting as well. So been awesome building out the tribe.
Yeah. So I think that this year, summarising some of that, there's been some big lessons. And whether they're lessons or they're probably more reminders this year of stuff that's always been true. And I think that basic one of change is the only constant. So the more you can just get yourself excited and able to traverse the change loop, the change just keeps happening, and that's going to throw problems at you, and problems handled well are opportunities, and problems handled poorly are crises. And you just got to manage that and get really good at managing that. That's what we're finding is differentiating successful companies from not.
Yeah, 100%. This year has just confirmed that. With all the change happening, tech change, AI change, market change, geopolitical change, investment landscaping change, you have to be good at traversing change.
Yeah. But also, a lot of the companies that were started and raised a hell of a lot of capital turned out not to be healthy, growth. They weren't healthy companies. And what we find is some of the very best businesses get built in hard times. And these times are certainly harder. I think for some, they may be getting a little harder, but it's when things are hard and you have to concentrate on resourcefulness rather than resources. And some of the work that we're trying to bring to portfolio, especially around advertising, creative and growth strategies, it's with very little dollars, how do you become incredibly resourceful so that you can get a marginal cost close to zero on some of your customer acquisition? Because you just don't have the depth of capital that we previously had to grow at all costs.
Yeah, I was having a chat with a university researcher out of Europe around why do companies fail when they scale globally? And this question came up of how much is the right amount of money to have in the bank? And I said, no, that's the wrong way of thinking about it. You can have the resources, but are you acting resourcefully? And that comes back more down to culture and organizational practices and habits. So, yeah, I think if I was to sum up 23, for me, it is that resourcefulness versus resources. It's all about efficient use of capital, working with what you have. We've seen the return to fundamentals in terms of metrics and what investors are looking for. That kind of sums up 23 for me.
Yeah. And it's that culture and climate that can identify these issues early that's going to win. And a lot of the time, people just didn't see it early. And then when they did see it, they didn't have the ability to pivot. They didn't have the ability to change.
Yeah.
And so what have we learned? What have we become more focused on coming out of this year?
Yeah, it's been good. We're founders just like pretty much everyone. But yeah, I feel we've got so much more clarity on Tribe in terms of our strategy, in terms of our marketing positioning. So our brand, our content strategy. I feel like we now have a lot more clarity on what to execute on. And that's not to say it's easy. It's still bloody hard, but having clarity is so valuable. I just find right now I know what needs to be done.
Yeah.
2024 is let's get into it.
It's going to be hard work, but there's an operating rhythm that we ourselves have found around trying to create some really empathetic content that talks to things that others maybe don't. That hopefully builds some trust and respect in as why we would be the right capital partners for the people that are in our vertical. And then the conversion event, if you will, of how do we learn more about you and you learn more about us is the events that we run. And then you found us via the content, then hopefully come to one of the events, and from there trying to really create a deeper relationship that can then turn into an investment, because then investments on behalf of our LPs put money in, but then what we do is do post-investment support. And I think we've become a lot more confident in our skin of where our value lies, and our existing portfolio has given us some really good feedback. And we're now at a point where we've now just got a really clear non-negotiable of it doesn't matter whether we put in $1, 10 million, or let's talk aspirationally, 100 million. This is how we intend to help you. This is how we see we can add value. And this is how we see the partnership working. And if that's not a fit, then we're not a fit, and just being comfortable in that.
Yeah, and I think for this year, it's been validation. It's always hard to know, are we actually adding value? But I feel like this year we've had some good indicators that the portfolio companies that engage, and recognizing that also that we have to earn our place, right? Like we're not the biggest check writer. We don't, automatically take a board seat and that's not even necessarily something we want. But actually, seeing the increasing rate of other investors referring deals to us because of the value we add beyond the capital is a great indicator. Seeing the portfolio companies that are increasingly leaning in and engaging and seeking more engagement and actively wanting us, and particularly you, Don, to deliver sessions and be part of their offsites and those sorts of events. That's been a great confirmation for us this year.
Yeah. So we just got to put fuel on that fire. We just got to make it bigger.
Yeah, a couple of other little ones just on the investor side, like that lesson again, you cannot over communicate. Shareholders and investors.
Even shareholders forget who you are and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So people are busy. They've got their own shit going on. They're particularly investors. They're in 72 other different things. And
investors by definition are entrepreneurial. An entrepreneurial mind by definition is busy and loves new balls of string. And they come in hot and heavy and they love you and you're the one. And then a new ball of string comes along. And if you don't put your ball of string back in front of them, they forget who you are. For us, our lessons is going old school a lot more next year. Like for us, far less email, more phone.
More phase two.
Yep. More phone, more face-to-face. Hey, checking in. And just remembering that we're trying to build a trusted relationship here. So therefore, we need to be building that relationship before we need anything from them.
Yeah, we were on a call this morning with a guru content creator and marketer, and it was that reminder that even the best content, you've got that 4 seconds to get your hook in. It's pretty much similar with people, not just in digital world, but you've got to be in front of them. You've got to be communicating.
Yeah. And the other thing I think we're clearer on AI in that we know that it's not to be fucked with. And in terms of what's going to create a return over 5 or 10 years, we still have no idea.
Yeah, I think the Dunning-Kruger curve, I feel like we're clearer on not being clear.
Yeah. But I think where we're playing is companies that have defensible moats, and we'll get to some of those in a minute, that then are able to use AI to strengthen that moat rather than investing direct into the AI wrapper. I think that's where, at least for right now, where we're playing. Jack, do you have a different view?
My view's still the same. Like, it's super risky. I'm long on the technology. Like, AI is going to be around, but as I've said previously, like when you've got a new space that's super crowded, it becomes like a new technology that's super crowded, just creates a super risky environment to invest in.
So we spoke about that $4 million that went into that Blackbird Clove. So that's an AI tool for recipes. And then 2 days later had an interview with an intern. He's got a startup, and we're like, oh, tell us about your startup. Oh, yeah, it's an AI tool for recipes. Yeah, so it's like, how do you...
Busy.
And Jack,
how do we switch?
Sorry, Aaron.
Yeah, you go.
I was just going to say, we came across TDM Capital, which is an Aussie business that is compared to Berkshire Hathaway in many instances. And their focus on culture really spoke to us because of our focus on culture. And Jack, you then took that and ran with it and really got into Hamilton Helmer's 7 Powers.
Yeah, so I think we've definitely taken that on board. And the 7 Powers is something we're applying to looking at how, when we look at a structural competitive advantage, we're definitely applying the 7 Powers. But even just to go back to TDM, like I've consumed a lot of their content, and it's amazing that they release it. But even just how they look at the pillars of a durable company, and part of that is like they use the 7 Powers. But it's just been really helpful for me to be able to then go back and then how we size up software companies.
Yeah. And what are those 7 Powers, Jack?
In the ones that we're looking at, especially in the space that we play in, is really scale economies, network effects, counter positioning and switching costs. But then there's also cornered resource or process power.
Yeah.
But, it's something, it's not complete, and this is going to be an ongoing thing that we're going to continue to discuss. But we really want to have a good understanding of these powers. So then when we're sizing up and speaking to companies, it's good for us to be able to understand the strategic advice.
Yeah, any framework that can help with deal evaluation and post-investment support. And we've then been looking at our existing portfolio through this framework, but then also the new deals coming through. Where is this structural competitive advantage going to come from long term? And the word that TDM really has drilled into my mind is durable.
Yeah, I found this really good for giving us a specific language, like breaking down the components. It reminded me of, we talk about trust a lot, but it wasn't until I read the Thin Book of Trust where it actually broke it down to 4 components that I really understood the ingredients and the different ways trust can be built and be broken. And for me, this is similar. I think this was a really awesome find, Jack, and I love how you've dived into it. And not just from the value, looking at a company before investing, but working with them. Like, how do we actually build on these with the portfolio codes? Yeah, I'm keen to dive into them even more. I feel like we're just scratching the surface.
Yeah.
The space that we play in, we're early stage investors, so we can't expect a company that's pre-Series A to have a structural competitive advantage. Because if they did, they wouldn't need us because someone would have already beaten us there, the existing investors. Yeah. So it's like working. We need to believe that they can find a structural competitive advantage. And that's when we're taking a bet on that and we're helping them find that.
Yeah, we've got to believe that the market will allow a structural competitive advantage and that the founders and their team can then capitalize on that. It's those things hand in hand. And that then also is that there's a culture that can be built to help support that. We've probably been quite organic in the way we've approached things, and we're trying to become more systemized. And the point there is, how do you filter in things that you might have filtered out because you were being too narrow or too biased? And how do you filter out things that you were going to filter in that you didn't have any good rational reason to filter in? And a lot of these things is we can't help come to this game without experience, but experience creates bias.
Yeah. And I think it was especially that latter point, Don, like the things we were going to filter in, but actually when you go through this, it's okay, there was no rational reason to do that, or there's a watch out here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's get into, I thought we just maybe talk a little bit about our portfolio. We're proud of our portfolio. We're here to help, here to support, and we've got hopefully some big plans for them.
Super proud of the portfolios. They're all heading in a positive direction. But kicking off with Leia, so one of the co-founders, Rashid, moved over to the UK not that long ago. They're still pushing hard to really find their product market fit. But full credit to them, they are pushing hard, having some wins with some of the bigger IP brands, and it's interesting tracking their contract value and especially their model with a bit of a royalty kick that carries on. So hopefully next year they'll achieve some critical mass in the platform.
Yeah, absolutely. Apply ID. So what Apply ID do is digital ID verification, anti-money laundering, integrated into your process. Accountants, real estate agents, lawyers, you all need to be using this. So they had a lot of strong traction in New Zealand when we invested, went to the UK, and fair to say it's been working through refining. It's not so much product market fit, I don't think. It's more customer messaging fit, because the UK market accepts and knows that it needs it. It's just more competitive than they had thought. And so what a lot of the experiments have been doing is how to get that message, how to get that brand connection, and how to find the right channels. And often for founders is there's a lot of choice. You can go after lots of different channels, and often you've got to test a lot of channels. But where Apply ID is at is they've done a lot of experiments now, and I think they're starting to get to that point of having some confidence to start to get some of that focus. And what we see is a common pattern in that first few million of ARR, there's an impulse to go really broad because you've got to keep the lights on. And as Adrian DeMarco has said in a couple of podcasts, it's okay to have the bluebird, so to speak, deals, but at a certain time you've got to be known for something and you've got to develop a really clear brand for something. And I think that's where they're at, where it's, okay, now that they've gotten into that $5-6 million ARR, they can now afford to become a bit more focused. So we're excited to be assisting them on that journey.
Another portfolio company is Swarm Farm. They're
Jack.
Another one of our portfolio companies is Swarm Farm. They're the market-leading autonomous robotics company based out of Emerald. They've had a really great year, and I suppose what I'm excited for them next year is continue to implement and refine the lean manufacturing production line, increasing their sales book, and then expanding to the US and exploring North America.
Yeah, it's been great to see them continue to lead the market. At the time of investing 12 months ago, they had 1 million acres farmed by their bots, and they've now surpassed 2 million. And they also just released their new automated dock and refueling stations.
That's a game.
Yes. So these things will just be out literally farming 24/7 without requiring much human interaction at all, which is just absolutely phenomenal. So super excited for Andrew and Josie. I think they've got big things ahead of them this year.
Yeah, we caught up with one of their directors, Sarah from Tenacious Ventures, and that's in a podcast that will be launched shortly. And it was really good to just connect with them. And behind the scenes, we always try and work with other shareholders on what can we be doing as a collective to be helping portfolio, because it's no good just one shareholder trying to push in a certain direction. We actually need the whole tribe, so to speak, pointing in the same direction. Then vendor panel. So we've been in there helping with a number of things. That's a great business. It's amazing when you say, on this customer market, we've run out of customers. We're now moving to this other customer because we've got such high penetration. And then net retention, I'm probably going to get this wrong, but it's over 110%, isn't it? It's just...
Yeah. I think from memory, it's 112, something like that.
It is just a powerhouse from that point of view. Now, they were poo-pooed a little bit because they didn't quite have the growth rates that the 2020, 2021 venture group had. And then now all of those have died off. What do investors want? They want net retention. and they've just grown that 35% a year. They're having facilitated some stuff with their team, really strong culture. James and David run a really tight ship there, and that net retention figure is just something that people should absolutely work towards.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to them. We talk about, when we're looking at a company and meeting with the founders pre-investment, we talk about you want to have that building conviction, and every interaction you want to have a higher conviction. For me, long post-investment, every interaction with James just even increasing higher conviction again. And it's incredible to see. And I really just love how they think about things and approach the business. And yeah, another one that's going to have a cracker 24.
Yeah, no, really, really good. Cake Equity, a lot of listeners will know that. Cake is the go-to place to manage your equity, your cap table, and your secondary sales. For them, they've got some competitors that they're going after, but they're trying to build a really authentic brand there with Kim and Jason. We had Kim on the mission to the UK, and that was really great to be able to spend time, us getting to know him getting to know us. Really great.
Yeah, Kim's just a powerhouse. That was such a great mission, just to get to know him more and just see the machine that he is and how that plays out with Cake. Phenomenal.
It's really great to see.
Now, Jack, as Canopy's key swag,
seeing as you're the pat
wearer, I feel like you should do the Canopy update.
So yeah, for the listeners, Canopy is another portfolio company, and they're an embedded insurance company. Nigel and the team have had a great year, and I think really excited next year for them to build out, bring on more insurers and connect to more partners. They've got a strong pipeline, so it'll just be great to see Nigel start to harvest it.
Yeah, I feel like Nigel and Canopy are like a spring that is just slowly getting compressed, and anybody that's in enterprise sales, if you think of insurance and risk and conservatism and long-term, that's a hell of a sales process, right? That's a hell of a sales cycle. But I think Nigel does an unbelievable job of some really great content of what he does, and he's able to bring his clients in to really become educators of other people in the market. And yeah, he's authentic and just really is there to help his customers. So I think next year is going to be a really great year. I'm looking forward to working there. We're gonna run a session down there late Jan, and then our newest
addition to the Tribe portfolio is Gasbot, which is Brisbane based. They provide IoT telemetry monitoring for two segments: LPG tanks and cylinders, and then on the ag side, mostly at the moment for water tanks, but this could be applied to grain silos and fuels and fertilizers. Phil's the founder, has some pedigree in this space, and it's been an absolute pleasure watching him close these very large LPG enterprise grade clients so quickly, but not just quickly.
11 countries. Talk about product market fit.
And just in a way that they have become absolute ambassadors for his product, and just that the loyalty they have to him, the conviction that they have in the product, it's absolutely phenomenal to see for an enterprise sale business.
Yeah, he brings people on early as a partner, really gets them involved, and then because they do in-house R&D, they can turn around new ideas like no one else. Yeah,
for me, walking into their window scrubbers and office, their lab, was just it makes my hair stand up even thinking about it. It's so great to see a team that is so well integrated, and they just are moving fast. So it's a pleasure to watch.
Emotion is required, but you've got to be careful with it, and you've got to be careful that your biases. But I think we went in there, we spent 90 minutes with the team. Then we went out, and I was like, mate, I think this is the real deal. Let's get an underwriting agreement. Let's get this thing done. If you looked at the security vision, it would have been these two dudes having this chat.
Don and I hugging in this little lane.
This little lane. And then it's like, what is going on here? And then we went back into Phil and said, mate, we're gonna make this happen. And I think we all in a ring and rosy held hands and jumped around. Now, you don't want to be that emotional, I don't think, on all investment decisions, but we've done a lot of work on it prior to that is my justification.
Yeah, a lot of work prior and after. Yeah, there's a lot of work went into speaking to their customers, corporate client.
Yeah, we shareholders, clients, venture partners, even some previous stuff on some competitors. So I give myself a leave pass for that level of emotional connection because we'd done the work.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was great to see the investor interest and getting that deal away. This time of year is never an easy time to be doing a raise, and the markets at the moment are never not easy. But it was great to see the level of interest and getting that deal done.
Yeah. So that's what we're excited for with the portfolio. We've got a few more in the fire, so watch this space. And a lot of VC firms provide resourcing for things like HR, some of the governance stuff, where I think that's required but not sufficient. Where we're moving more towards is getting operational on the go-to-market, content creation, marketing, sales. And I think we're hopefully really going to lead from that, because if we can turn up and say, we can help you get a flywheel cranking here, that is absolutely the most important thing, because sales solve all problems. Sales with the right margin to the right customers in the right geographies save all problems.
Yeah. Oh, if you look at the heart of our support, like building for sustainable growth, like we are on that side of the equation. And so I think this focus around a lot of the sessions we run around building a scalable sales machine, but now shifting this content marketing type aspect rather than the HR talent recruitment side, which other VCs focus on. I think just it's true to our thesis and our value prop.
So yeah, looking forward to that. Now I thought we'd just touch on, we had a few one-liners that came up through the year. We've already, resourcefulness over resources is a one-liner that I think's important. I think this was in the context of Elon, but it's really in the context of anyone that does things without thinking of the consequences. And I think the one that has caught on this year is that the dildo of consequence never arrives lubed. And I think that's just really important for people to remember that the seeds that you sow today and those consequences, and I see it in myself, I see it in portfolio, I see it just around, that those consequences for behavior will catch up.
Yep.
And in certain areas where some of that behavior comes is when you're trying to make everyone happy, or you're trying to people please. But the last person to try and make everyone happy got nailed to a cross. Sometimes you just can't do that, and that gets you into a pickle.
Yep. I feel like a lot of these are Donisms.
Yeah.
We should have I still think we should have a T-shirt printed with some of these.
And it was in Elon's corp, and anybody that is so full of shit. I think the one line of this year was, you could give him an enema and you could bury him in a matchbox. I think that was first put towards Donald Trump. But another thing that we're seeing with portfolio, the one liner sometimes is we're just too busy to get anything done. And when you're in the weeds, when you're in the thick of it, when the short term is just draining all of your energy on putting out fires, you're just too busy to get anything done. And the getting things done is the real work. It's the working on the business. And that's really some of the work we try and do with portfolio, is how do you run your business and change it at the same time? How do you fly the plane and build it simultaneously? And you've got to be able to create space to get things done. And we try and help that. And that then dovetails into, they're always too busy, but they never have time to do it right, but they always seem to have time to do it again. And so often in the early stage cultures, we constantly keep fucking up the same thing, and we seem to always have time to do it again, but we never have time to go and do it once and do it right. And that's a very normal cultural thing.
Yeah, and hence why they're too busy to get anything done. Yeah, look, this year we did talk about tech debt, and then we talked about structural debt, and we talked about all these things that carry a liability, and sometimes it is this corner cutting, which is an inevitable part of early stage. But at some point, these things come back to bite you in the butt, and they end up costing more time down the track than if they'd been done right up front.
And then
our new word, which we're submitting to the Oxford Dictionary.
Shut up.
Shut ups.
It's a startup that somewhere just turned to shit a little bit. You didn't mean to happen. It probably came because you were pushing too hard. And it's left a little bit of a mess.
Yeah.
And you're probably going to hide it from the outside world, and you're going to try and clean it up on your own. Those that are around you are probably going to know. They're going to smell it.
This could just keep
going.
They
could just keep going. But there is an inevitability.
Yeah.
So what are we thinking for 24? What are some of the predictions?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. So I saw a stat, 50% of the world is going to an election next year. So I think there's going to be just more uncertainty with everything going on. That's not really a prediction. I feel like it's stating the obvious, increasing rates of uncertainty.
Yeah, the only thing certain is uncertainty. And so for some, I think the economic indicators that I'm seeing is that for some it is going to get a bit more challenging. Corporates in some areas are well and truly pulling back. Households are starting to pull back, and it's going to be interesting to see what interest rates do. But at the same time, we're seeing tech, so the NASDAQ at all-time highs. When interest rates go down, long duration assets, growth assets go up. The market tends to smell these things. And so the fact that tech is absolutely ripped higher, even if we end up in a recessionary situation with interest rates down, there may actually be more demand for tech, and perversely, we may actually see valuations go up in the face of a recession.
Yep. I think as well, AI is frothy, but I think we're going to see it come back to those that deliver real value. Yeah. I think Des Trainer's point around corporate budgets for AI experimentation are drying up. Discretionary spend is drying up. So if AI will still dominate, but it has to be adding real value.
Yeah. I think blockchain's coming back.
That's interesting, because my view is it'll become ubiquitous and not talked about like cloud.
Yeah, I think in Canva, we think Canva's going to IPO next year. Hopefully it's really successful and it's a great outcome for the Aussie ecosystem.
Yeah, which dovetails into that whole, this ecosystem needs to see cash. It's got Jerry Maguire sitting there going, show me the money. And so a liquidity event across a whole range of things, I think, is going to absolutely see that cash return start to become even more prevalent.
Do we think we're going to see more IPOs next year? More successful IPOs next year?
Given the way the NASDAQ's going, and if interest rates continue to drop, I think so. I think stuff that has growth with an eye to profitability, I don't think we're going to be seeing stuff that isn't profitable. I think we're going to want to see how they get to profitability in a high interest rate environment or higher.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to track the M&A activity. I think there's going to be some consolidation in different segments and potentially some roll-up activity.
Yeah, and Dom, we were talking about like the ones that don't have growth. There's going to be an increase in distressed assets as a result.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of the distressed assets are really seeing it. Zoe Foster Blake has just rebought the 50% of her business that she sold for $89 million, rebought it back for $9 million. And my prediction is we're going to see that a lot. And I think Simon is going to buy back Culture Kings. I can just see that happening. And it's what Kerry Packer did. You only get one Alan Bond, $1 billion and $50 million. He sold Channel 9 to Alan Bond for. 2 years later, Bondi gets into the shit and Kerry takes it back for the debt that he'd put in for $200 million. That was his greatest deal.
Yeah, far out. Kerry Packer it.
And that for companies that don't get bought back, that get into trouble, I think we're just going to see the continuation of liquidations and wind-ups for companies whose narrative doesn't match where the future's going.
Yeah, and we had a little chat as a team about the VC side of this, whether there's a lot of VCs that haven't raised sufficient capital to be self-sufficient on a fee structure, who are also in a bit of a state of distress and burnout from what we know of them. And so potentially, are we going to see a bit of consolidation of the VC firms and funds?
Yeah, I think that's true. So what's new from Tribe in 2020?
No shortage of new podcast episodes, that's for sure.
I'd like to apologise to the listeners.
So, more podcasts, more content, more real-world events. So we have quite an aggressive schedule of investor dinners, lunches, participating in more ecosystem events, and 4 offsites like we mentioned before. So a plug for our upcoming No Excuses offsite in the first weekend in February. We still have some places available if you'd like to come and join us. And this is very much about scaling yourself, removing your own inhibitors to growth, and look at your own kind of structural and behavioral aspects that might be holding you back. And that's with an epic group. It is focused around founders and investors, but you don't necessarily have to be, and you don't have to be B2B for this one. But that'll kick off our formal events for the year ahead of our US mission in March and our UK mission in June. So no shortage of activities for Tribe to get involved in.
Yeah, it's going to be good. And on the podcast, we're going to add a few little things. So one of the things is we're going to do a sort of a listener question Q&A kind of thing. So we're going to be asking people to submit things that they just want a view on. If you want some random view that probably makes no sense and add no value, we are your people.
That's us. That's a perfect tagline for our podcast.
And then on Tribe Talking, we're going to try and occasionally get domain experts for when we're doing a deep dive, go a little bit deeper into domain, whether it be IP or content creation, or it's just stuff that we know that founders and investors would get some value on. And so we couldn't end without thanking the guests that we've had on this year, because the guests have really helped us get an audience. The guests have been the ones that have added unbelievable value. Luke Anir, Adrian DeMarco, Vu Tran, Catherine McConnell, Vicky Forrest, Adrian Bunter, Nick Abrams, Andrew and Jossie Bate, Kim Hansen, Anne-Marie Burkle, Simone Joyce, Trina Probert, Russell Smith and Claudia Smith, Susanna George, and of course, the unsolicited cameos of Elon Musk. But that is a phenomenal series of people. When I just read that out there, what a tribe.
What a tribe. Like, we've been so fortunate with each of them giving their time to come on to this little podcast project of ours. It's because we only kicked this off in, what was it, August? Was it pre...
I feel like
I remember when we...
forever, but this is still like episode 31, I think.
Yeah, past the 30 milestone, end of year. But look, it's great to see the engagement. It's interesting, the conversations that happen on the back of these podcast episodes. And if you are still listening at this point to this episode, please engage with us. Reach out, comment, tell us what you really think. It's almost like we need
proof of life. If you could just... Does anybody get to this point?
Based on that phone call this morning with the guru marketer, I think we lost him at the 4-second mark.
Yeah, that's it.
It's just been us talking to ourselves.
Yeah, no, it has been. And I'd like to absolutely acknowledge Lainey Stead, who helped us start this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
And acknowledge her contribution and the fact that she goes on to continue sharing through this. She's been on a number of podcasts. Joe from...
McKay, was it?
Yeah, Joe McKay's podcast, and most recently with, as we already said, Cheryl and Maxine, and I highly recommend that episode. So yeah, full acknowledgement and shout out to Lainey.
Yeah, miss you, Lainey.
I think
that's 2023.
I think that's 2023.
What a year. What a year. I'm sure none of our predictions will come true, and at the end of 2024, we'll be talking about completely different stuff than what we anticipate.
Just stunned silence.
Well done to you, Don, on pulling these together. So for listeners, Don is the one that does the magic work of editing us to have some resemblance of sanity and coherence. So thank you, Don, for all the hard work in pulling these together.
Yeah, my typical entrepreneur, my personality, as some do, you start a project and you don't know whether you're going to have the energy to take it through. Hence why the farm has 30 unfinished projects, the house has 15 unfinished projects. So I was always a little concerned, but I absolutely love this. And whilst it takes around about 4 hours now, I've got it down, 4 hours to every 1 hour. You just be surprised at all the little stuff. I hope we add enough value to the people listening. And if we don't, all I can do is apologise, or we're not actually going to stop.
It's as much our own therapy.
Yeah. All right, boys.
But no, thank you both. Thank you for an epic 23. Looking forward to 24 with you both.
Yes, 24. 2 + 2 is 4. It's going to be a good year. All right.
See you guys.